very special guest, a friend of mine, actually, goes by the moniker of Telltale Atheist, also known as Owen Morgan. Telltale, how's it going, bud?
It's going well. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, man. It's been a while since you and I have talked. We first met actually at the Faithless Forum last year in Dallas, Texas, which we're both actually going to be speaking at again this year. And I had been familiar with your stuff before. I think that was the first time you met me. And gosh, I mean, your channel, for those of you who don't know, is just full of all kinds of great material, specifically on like cults and stuff. That's really what you focus on. And also a special emphasis on like Jehovah's Witness material in particular. And I was just hoping we could kind of just start this conversation by just talking about what you do and like why you've chosen that as your particular like thing on YouTube.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I started out talking about Kent Hovind and generally just kind of extremist Christians, Ken Ham, people like that. Eventually, I decided to kind of venture into Jehovah's Witness territory. Now, I didn't know how popular that was going to be, but I ended up doing my first video on it. It was big. I mean, people seemed to enjoy it. So I was pretty happy about that because that's something that I really wanted to talk about. And I didn't think that video was going to hit. I thought it was a myth. But sure enough, it worked out. And I've been talking about Jehovah's Witnesses ever since. That kind of formed my pathway into extremism generally. I started talking about Mormonism because I didn't want it to be exclusive to Jehovah's Witnesses, of course. And, you know, any kind of crazy cult I could come up with. I talked about Heaven's Gate and Jonestown and just a bunch of them.
Yeah, you and I actually,
that's what I do now.
We collaborated on a video together. It was a while back now, I guess a few months ago, on the Waco siege and the stuff that happened with David Koresh and those guys. And that was really interesting. I think I want to kind of talk about a little bit about your background. I don't know how much you want to get into it, but like, I think your depiction of, or I'm going to say criticism, I guess. I try to be as neutral and as, you know, inviting to anybody's positions on here as I can be. But your story of how you grew up in the Jehovah's Witness faith is, to me, absolutely just, well, first of all, it makes me angry, but it's also terrifying to know that this kind of happened to you. And there's just so many people who just don't know anything about, you know, like Jehovah's Witnesses in general. I know I didn't before I even ran across your channel and stuff. And I just wanted to know if you were willing to kind of talk about that a little bit more for people.
Yeah, sure. So my story isn't, I don't know that I would say that my story is particularly bad. I mean, there are people with worse stories than mine, of course. But my story is one of social isolation, pretty heavy on that. You know, as a Jehovah's Witness, wasn't really allowed to have worldly friends, quote unquote. Wasn't allowed to have friends with people outside of the religion. And that's bad. I mean, that scarred my social life permanently. And this is the story of millions of people. There are millions of people. Somebody right now is sitting at their house alone because they don't have any friends. They're not allowed to have any friends. So that's kind of, I think that's the root of the thing that motivates me. That and the stories of people who are being kicked out of their houses right now at 16, 17, 18 years old. You know, it's happening right now. I talked to 3 or 4 different people around that age who are going through that exact experience right now. The same experience I went through when I was 18. So I'm hyper-focused on helping people deal with that type of situation. Not just Jehovah's Witnesses, but Mormons and cult members generally.
Do you mind going into detail a little bit more, like what happened when you were 18?
Yeah. Okay. So, oh, where to begin? So I was born. I'll start there. I was born into the religion, and you know, my parents, they were not born into it. They converted. My dad converted to be with my mom and all of this other stuff. They were in the military before that, but My brother and I were both born into it. I have 2 other siblings who weren't, but we grew up this way, believing these strange things. And it's a little bit different for us, people who were born into cults, because a cult is, their goal is to kind of replace your authentic personality with the cult personality, with the traits that they want you to have. For example, commonly cults will want you to be malleable and humble and willing to please people and willing to give up your money and things like that, right? Mm-hmm. But what is my authentic self as a born-in cult member? Did I have an authentic self in the first place? Those are questions that I had to face. So when I turned 16, 17 years old, started kind of asking questions about the religion. I was trying to have a normal social life, trying to live and have fun and have friends. There weren't really any, there weren't any Jehovah's Witnesses my age. So I ended up looking to the outside world for friends when I turned about 17, 18 years old. And I had a job. I started doing things that Jehovah's Witnesses frown upon, but the rest of the world might not necessarily frown upon. For example, I was drinking alcohol. Of course, I was underage at the time. I was 18. That was wrong, for sure. But it wasn't disfellowshipping wrong. It wasn't take your family away for the rest of your life wrong, right? That's a little bit of a disproportionate response to what I was doing. I also smoked a cigarette at that time, and they used that as a reason to disfellowship me. There were other things going on in my life at that time that they used to disfellowship me. But yeah, 18 years old, I wasn't done with high school. I was in 11th grade because of some weird stuff that happened. They homeschooled me for a while, and I had to go back and all kinds of stuff. So I wasn't supposed to graduate until I was 19. I was in 11th grade at the time when my parents kicked me out. And I ended up crawling in the window of this girl's house that I knew from school, and I stayed in her bedroom without her family knowing for 3 weeks. You don't really realize what's involved in hiding from a family like that until you have to do it, until you have to live in a bedroom. I mean, sneaking food and everything. But, I ended up meeting that family, and they have replaced the family that I lost in a big way. They are my family now after 10, actually, this was at 18 and I'm 29. So almost 12 years, I'd say. It's been almost 12 years since I've known these people, and they've just taken care of me like their own son. So my story ended well in the sense that I have people who care about me and who take care of me. I can't say the same for a lot of these kids who are dealing with this right now. So that's kind of the story. That's what happened.
Yeah. So I want to talk about this idea because you use the word cult. And I know you talk about this a lot in your channel. I know growing up for me, as a Christian, I kind of associated Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons in the same kind of category to me because they were both kind of this other kind of Christian thing that most people I knew just kind of looked down upon for some reason, that I didn't really know much about them. I knew that they didn't celebrate their birthdays, and I knew that they went door to door for people, and that was about it. I didn't really realize the depth and just the level of, I'm going to use the word control, that the Jehovah's Witnesses kind of has over their congregations. I think that's a fair word to say, as far as their own newsletter publications, their own sort of leadership, their own sort of rules on how to dress, how to interact with other people. The idea that you couldn't have any secular friends to me, that was a new one for me. And I didn't know about this until I saw your channel, actually. I think was the first I kind of heard about a lot of this. And I think that's the case for most people. I don't think the average person really knows a lot about Jehovah's Witnesses and what kind of goes on. And it's just really shocking to me, especially if you look at the history and kind of the abuses that have happened with this organization, of just how much one group of people can get away with doing so much.
Yeah, that's definitely true. You know, talking about cults, I think that the thing that kind of denotes a cult, I've talked about this on my channel. You know this. A lot of people know this, but for the audience anyways, there's something called the BITE model. It stands for Behavior, Information, Thought, and Emotion Control. BITE. It's an acronym. And it kind of goes through a list of things that that you can expect from a cult, that you can expect a cult to do, with the end goal of replacing your personality with the one that they want you to have. So if I look at a cult member and I see this fake plastic persona sitting on the top layer there, it's probably a cult to me. I can just talking to one of the members about the religion and then talking about sports or something, usually I'll be able to tell if it's a cult or not that way. But yeah, Jehovah's Witnesses are most definitely a cult because they, among other things, exert something called undue influence. Now, a lot of this stuff, you know, I didn't come up with any of this. I got to give credit where credit's due. A lot of this came from Stephen Hassan. He wrote a book called Combating Cult Mind Control, talks about a lot of this stuff. In fact, he's written 3 books now. It's got a 4th coming out, I think, in September. Really fantastic guy. All this stuff's been accepted by the psychology community, so you guys should check that out. If you have not read that book, you should read that book for sure. But yeah. So the book, it talks a lot about undue influence, where people don't understand the consequences of the actions. For example, if somebody tells them, okay, here's a good example. A child is kind of pushed by its parents to get baptized as a Jehovah's Witness. That kid can say until they're blue in the face that it was their choice and they wanted to. But was it really? I mean, you know, they're impressionable, they're young, they don't really know the consequences of this baptism. Was it really their choice? No, it wasn't. It was undue influence by the cult.
I want to talk. Oh man, there's so much we can dive into here. Just to remind people, though, this is a call-in show. We are going to be taking calls in a second. So if you want to come and talk to me or Telltale about Jehovah's Witness stuff, or just really any topic in general, as long as we're talking about beliefs, we are open to it. The phone number that is on screen, it is 512-686-0279. Go ahead and give us a phone call. Yeah, we are live here with Telltale Atheist, YouTuber, podcast producer, ex-Jehovah's Witness, has a lot to say about cults. He's been doing this thing for a few years now, and a personal friend of mine. He has just an interesting story and an interesting view on things. I think, you know, like, we use the term cult very liberally, I think, you know, at least in the United States, from my experience. I think we talk about we call things cults kind of all the time, but it's interesting to me that we can actually kind of break this word down into a science of sorts, and have a lot of scholarship on the ideas of, okay, like, how do we define cults as opposed to just general religions and stuff? Like, is this group a cult? Is this group a cult? And we can kind of see kind of a piece-by-piece breakdown of what makes something a cult. What do you think it is that makes Jehovah's Witnesses a cult?
It's a good question. Here's the thing. Something I've noticed with Mormonism, for example. A lot of the time, Mormons will, this is their tactic for getting out of the whole "you're a cult" accusation. They will pick out one thing and say, well, look, you know, Catholicism does this thing. For example, they'll say a cult is, they'll just take any random dictionary definition of cult and they'll say, for example, one of them is venerate somebody, worship some figure who's still alive or something. Well, look, Catholics have the Pope, so yeah, I guess they're a cult. I'm a cult. We'll just all accept the title of cult, right? That's the tactic that they take. And I remember when I was when I was studying to be a Jehovah's Witness, when I was studying to get baptized, they kind of gave me a similar line. They said, here's a dictionary definition. Somebody or a group who practices strange beliefs and worships a person. Of course, that's kind of an outdated, odd, vague definition. So we can look to the psychology community and figure out exactly what defines a cult. And as far as the psychology community is concerned, that is the BITE model. Things like Do they take advantage of you financially? Do they control your clothing and hairstyle? Do they regulate how and with whom you have sex? Do they, that's all under behavior. Let me think about some thought ones. Do they inspire a black and white, us versus them kind of mentality? Let's see. Do they threaten your friends or family? Do they make your family shun you if you leave? Do they shame you publicly for changing your beliefs on something? Do you have to have this collectivist, us versus them mindset about things? That kind of thing. So those are the things that, if we went down the list, those are the things that you would see Jehovah's Witnesses doing in a really big way. Now, there are different extremes for each thing. For example, Jehovah's Witnesses are really bad about shunning. Mormonism, not so much. Mormonism is worse on other things than Jehovah's Witnesses. So you have to kind of, there is no exact science when you get down to it, but if you can look at this group and see them kind of setting up this system of rewards and punishments for this rule, for the set of rules that they have, and if you can see this hierarchy that's enforcing this system of rewards and punishments to try to mold somebody's personality into what they want it to be, it's a cult.
You know, it's funny. I went to New Orleans this past weekend. I went up there to see my girlfriend, Christy, and we were going downtown in the French Quarter. And if you've ever been to New Orleans, or at least you've heard about it, you know, it can be a pretty debaucherous city. You know, you got people dressed in all sorts of colors and clothing, people coming in and out of bars and stuff. And it was so funny because we were driving down the French Quarter, and in the middle of all of this, you know, partying and stuff going on downtown, it was on a weekend, and it's almost Mardi Gras season down there. There was two people there, a man and a woman, dressed very conservatively with like this kind of, you know, these signs and stuff everywhere saying like, oh, if you want to learn the truth of the Bible, like here, come look at this stuff. And I realized, oh, these guys are Jehovah's Witnesses. And they just look so uncomfortable. They just look so like out of place, especially compared to everywhere else. And it kind of reminded me of you because I know this, you know, that's the kind of the world.
Because I look uncomfortable all the time.
No, it's just, you know, like you see these people and they pass by through your life, you know, like they come to your door and then they leave. And I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on in their home life. I don't know what their relationships are like with other people. I don't know what the kind of struggles they're going through. And it fills me with a kind of sadness when I see something like that. You know, like I don't want to make fun of these people. There's a part of me that wants to help these people. But of course, I can't just go up to somebody and say, hey, you're in a cult. Let me help you. Let me pull you out of here. You know, like that's just not how we kind of socialize ourselves. So like, what is your take on like just even talking to people who you believe might be in a cult or something like the Jehovah's Witnesses? I mean, like, especially if they're out on the street. I mean, do you engage with people when you see them? Do you just kind of avoid them? I mean, what's your take on kind of talking to people?
It depends. So a while back, I made a video called How to Troll Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, this was a little bit clickbaity. I will admit it. I apologize for the clickbaitiness of it, but it was really talking about how to talk to them, what you're supposed to do. So usually Jehovah's Witnesses get a number of different responses. It'll either be not interested, go away, or you know, they'll slam the door in your face, or sometimes they get invited in. If you don't want Jehovah's Witnesses there, you don't have to release dogs on them. That happened to me when I was like 9 years old. You don't have to release dogs on them. You don't have to hold a shotgun in their face. It's unnecessary. You can just say, put me on a do not call list. And because they have this list that's supposed to be to prevent them from bothering people in the neighborhood. You know, just ask them to put you on the do not call list and they won't show up for like 5-10 more years. They'll come every 5 to 10 years, make sure that you still live there. Just tell them again. It's no big thing. You know, it's sad when people get abused like that. I remember that happening to me. I have nothing against Jehovah's Witnesses as people, nothing against them. I want to help them, just like you were saying. I want to help them find their way out and recognize like the Watchtower Society is kind of the amoral monster that it is. But honestly, my best approach, I've moved into this house probably 2 years ago. And I've been waiting for a Jehovah's Witness to show up since, because I'm in a different district now. They don't know me now. Yeah. So they would come knock and, you know, I'd invite them in and see if we could work that belief right out of them. But I have not seen one yet. They knocked on my door, left a tract like 6 months ago. I was so disappointed I missed them. But yeah, I figured my best approach at talking to Jehovah's Witnesses and other cult members generally is street epistemology. That's really the best way to do it. I talk about it all the time on my channel as a really good method of trying to cast off that fake personality, that cult personality, trying to get them to recognize that their beliefs are irrational, and help them kind of restore their authentic self as best as I can.
Yeah. And I just want to be clear here, you know, I try to be as open to all kinds of positions as possible, but every time I look at the history of Jehovah's Witnesses and you really do a deep dive on this stuff, and especially when I'm hearing stories like yours and others on YouTube from the ex-Jehovah's Witness community, you know, it's hard for me to just be like, okay, let's meet on common ground and kind of talk about this. It's so, because it's so obvious to me. It seems so obvious to me. And even though it might sound so imperialistic to say like, oh, we have to go out and help these people. Like, I mean, how else are people going to escape a lot of these abuses if you don't have systems in check internally in these kinds of organizations to help the people who are in need? I mean, yeah, you've talked about this on your channel, but countless time and time again, when somebody is crying for help, they seem to be stuck in a system that either ignores them or tries to shun them or shut them up in some ways. Yeah. And there's so much documentation of cases of, you know, sexual abuse and all kinds of stuff that gets covered up by the Watchtower organization, like you said, and Watchtower Society, I think. And I just, you know, it's hard for me to look at that and be happy about that and say like, oh yeah, let's enjoy the conversation. Let's try to figure out what truth is. To me, it's just like, this is just, it's a dead end to me. And
it's difficult, but you know, it's still the approach that you have to take in conversations like this, even though, you know, you're on this side and it's really hard to relate to that mindset. Honestly, it's hard to do, but it's still the direction you have to take. You still have to try to find common ground and work with them and be willing to give concessions here or there, right?
Absolutely. Like, I just think, like, what if my brother decided he wanted to join, you know, the Jehovah's Witness or something? Like, first off, I would show him your videos, probably. But it's like, yeah, I want to help this person out. Like, I want them to help out. Like, okay, well, let's look at this organization. You know, like, let's see what they've done before. Are they reputable? Have they done good things? I have zero doubts in my mind that Jehovah's Witnesses all over the globe have done great things for people as far as community events and given people a sense of belonging and togetherness. But it's just a situation of, well, do the harms outweigh the goods here? And, you know, in my assessment of this, I have to say yes. You know, if there's a Jehovah's Witness that's watching this right now and wants to talk to us about it, by all means, come on and talk to us. But this is one of those cases where it's like, yeah, man, I can't, you know, I can't it's hard for me to see people go on doing stuff like this, you know?
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard to watch. But like I said, I mean, we just take it one day at a time. I actually know like a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, and I know a couple of current ones, but generally they're not allowed to talk to somebody like me. I was kind of hoping that maybe we would get like a Jehovah's Witness on, but I don't have high hopes for it because, you know, just talking to me is a disfellowshipping offense. They will lose their friends and family just for talking to me, or listening to me.